It was supposed to be just another routine flight. Passengers boarding, overhead bins clicking shut, and the hum of the engines preparing to carry everyone to their destinations. But what unfolded on this particular flight was anything but ordinary. Imagine this. A quiet, unassuming man in a crisp black suit settles into his first-class seat. He's calm, polite, and doesn't draw much attention to himself. But beneath that composed exterior lies a secret, one that would soon turn the entire flight upside down. This man isn't just any passenger. He's Marcus Johnson, a self-made billionaire who happens to own the very airline he's flying on. And what happens next will leave everyone on board, especially one flight attendant, wishing they could rewind time. The flight attendant, Sarah, is known for her no-nonsense attitude. She's efficient, professional, and takes her job seriously. But today, something about Marcus rubs her the wrong way. Maybe it's the way he politely declines her offer of a pre-flight drink, or the way he seems lost in thought, barely acknowledging her presence. Whatever it is, Sarah's patience wears thin, and then, in a moment of frustration, she does the unthinkable. A sharp, impulsive slap echoes through the cabin. The entire first-class section freezes. Passengers gasp. Marcus, stunned, looks up at Sarah, his expression unreadable. The tension in the air is so thick you could cut it with a knife. But here's the twist. Sarah has no idea who Marcus really is. To her, he's just another passenger, albeit one who seems a little too aloof for her liking. She doesn't know that this man holds the power to change her life with a single phone call. And as the plane taxis down the runway, Marcus doesn't say a word. He simply sits there, his face a mask of calm, while Sarah's heart races. What will happen when the truth comes out? Will Marcus demand justice? Or is there more to this story than meets the eye? The flight has just begun, but one thing is certain. Nothing will ever be the same for Sarah or for Marcus. As the plane climbs higher into the sky, the tension between the two grows. Sarah tries to brush off the incident, telling herself it was just a moment of weakness. But deep down, she knows she crossed a line. Marcus, on the other hand, remains eerily quiet. He doesn't confront her, doesn't demand an apology. Instead, he watches her closely, his eyes following her every move as she goes about her duties. It's as if he's waiting for the right moment to reveal his hand. And then, just as the seatbelt sign dings off, Marcus reaches into his pocket and pulls out his phone. He types something quickly, his fingers moving with purpose. Sarah notices but says nothing. Her stomach churns with dread. What is he doing? Who is he texting? And what will happen when the plane lands? The story of Marcus and Sarah is one of power, privilege, and the consequences of our actions. It's a reminder that every decision we make, no matter how small, can have far-reaching effects. As the flight continues, the stakes grow higher. Passengers whisper among themselves, speculating about what will happen next. Will Sarah lose her job? Will Marcus use his influence to teach her a lesson? Or is there a chance for redemption in this high-stakes drama? The answers lie ahead, but one thing is clear. This is no ordinary flight, and by the time the plane touches down, lives will be changed forever. But for now, the story hangs in the balance, leaving us all on the edge of our seats, waiting to see what happens next. As the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, the cabin settled into a tense quiet. The usual hum of conversation was replaced by uneasy glances and hushed murmurs. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Sarah, still shaken, tried to focus on her duties. She moved through the aisle with practiced efficiency, offering drinks and snacks, but her hands trembled slightly as she poured a cup of coffee for a passenger. Her mind raced. What had she done? She had never lost her temper like that before. Sure, passengers could be difficult, but this was different. This felt personal, and she couldn't quite explain why. Marcus, meanwhile, remained in his seat, his demeanor calm, but his mind working overtime. He had built his empire from the ground up, starting with nothing but a dream and an unshakable work ethic. He was used to being underestimated, overlooked, or even dismissed because of the color of his skin. But this was something else entirely. He replayed the moment in his head, the sting of the slap, the shock on Sarah's face, the way the entire cabin had gone silent. He wasn't angry, not exactly. He was curious. Why had she reacted that way? What had he done to provoke her? Or was it something deeper, something she was carrying with her? Marcus had always been a student of human behavior, and this situation was a puzzle he couldn't resist solving. As the flight wore on, Sarah found herself stealing glances at Marcus. He wasn't what she expected. Most first-class passengers demanded attention, flaunted their status, or treated the crew as invisible. But Marcus was different. He was quiet, almost introspective. He hadn't made a scene, hadn't demanded to speak to her supervisor. He hadn't done anything, and that unnerved her more than if he had. What was he thinking? Was he planning something? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making it hard to focus. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had made a terrible mistake, one that could cost her everything. Meanwhile, Marcus's phone buzzed softly in his hand. He glanced at the screen, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He had sent a message to his assistant earlier, asking for information on Sarah. The response was quick and thorough. Sarah had been with the airline for 5 years. She had a spotless record, glowing reviews from passengers, and a reputation for going above and beyond. But there was something else, a recent note in her file about a personal issue. Marcus's brow furrowed as he read the details. Sarah's mother had been diagnosed with a serious illness, and Sarah had been struggling to balance her work with caring for her. The stress had been taking its toll. Marcus leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. This changed things. It didn't excuse her actions, but it explained them, and it gave him an idea. As the hours passed, the tension in the cabin grew thicker. Passengers exchanged knowing looks, their curiosity piqued by the drama unfolding in first class. Some whispered theories about who Marcus might be, while others speculated about Sarah's fate. Would she be fired, arrested, or would Marcus let it go? The uncertainty kept everyone on edge, their attention divided between their own concerns. And the unfolding story in the front of the plane. Sarah, meanwhile, was trapped in her own thoughts. She replayed the moment over and over, each time wishing she could take it back. She had always prided herself on her professionalism, her ability to handle even the most difficult passengers with grace. But today, she had failed. And not just failed. She had crossed a line she never thought she would. She thought about her mother, about the mounting medical bills and the long nights spent at the hospital. She thought about how exhausted she was, how close she felt to breaking. And she thought about Marcus, about the way he had looked at her after the slap, not with anger, but with something she couldn't quite place. Understanding. Pity. She didn't know, and that scared her more than anything. As the plane began its descent, Marcus finally broke his silence. He pressed the call button, the soft chime cutting through the tension like a knife. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she walked over to him, her steps slow and deliberate. She forced a smile, her professional mask firmly in place. "Yes, sir? How can I assist you?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her nerves. Marcus looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "I'd like to speak with you after we land," he said simply. His tone was calm, but there was a weight to his words that made Sarah's stomach drop. She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. What did he want? Was this it? Was he going to report her? She didn't know, and the not knowing was torture. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, the sound of the engines reversing, jolting Sarah back to reality. She went through the motions of preparing for arrival, her movements automatic as her mind raced. The passengers began to disembark, their curious glances lingering on Sarah and Marcus. She avoided their eyes, focusing on her tasks, but she could feel their stares like a physical weight. And then, finally, it was just her and Marcus left in the cabin. He stood, his tall frame towering over her, and gestured toward the exit. "Shall we?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Sarah nodded, her heart pounding as she followed him off the plane. The airport was bustling, the noise and chaos a stark contrast to the tense silence of the cabin. Marcus led the way, his strides confident and purposeful. Sarah trailed behind, her mind racing with possibilities. Where was he taking her? What was he going to say? She thought about running, about disappearing into the crowd and never looking back, but she knew she couldn't. She had to face whatever was coming, no matter how terrifying it might be. They reached a quiet corner of the terminal, away from the crowds. Marcus turned to face her, his expression serious but not unkind. "Sarah," he began, his voice low and measured, "I think we need to talk." She swallowed hard, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I'm so sorry," she blurted out, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I don't know what came over me. I've never done anything like that before. Marcus held up a hand, cutting her off. "I know," he said, simply. "I know about your mother, about the stress you've been under." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. How could he possibly know that? Marcus continued, his tone softening. "I'm not here to punish you, Sarah. I'm here to offer you a choice." Sarah stared at him, her mind reeling. A choice? What did that mean? Before she could ask, Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to her, his eyes locking onto hers. "Call this number," he said. "Tell them Marcus Johnson sent you. They'll take care of everything." Sarah looked down at the card, her hands trembling. It was for a top-tier medical facility, one she could never afford on her own. She looked back up at Marcus, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus smiled, a small, enigmatic smile. "Because everyone deserves a second chance," he said. "Even me." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Sarah standing there, the card clutched tightly in her hand. She watched him go, her mind spinning with questions. Who was this man? What did he mean by even me? And what was she supposed to do now? The answers were out of reach, lost in the whirlwind of emotions and uncertainty. But one thing was clear: this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. And whatever came next, Sarah knew her life would never be the same.